This lesson will cover historical perspectives of parents, social systems theory and family systems approaches, enablement and empowerment, Wilker's stress adaptation model, a stage model of reaction to having a child with a disability, and families throughout the life cycle. The last component of this lesson will include creating a communication template. This will be a graded activity, so please remember to turn it in via the assignment link in ReggieNet. Before we get started, I wanted to make mention of the topic of confidentiality of information on students and their families. The bottom line is that not everyone in the school, and actually very few people outside of the school, have a need to know private information about a student or a family. The only ones who need to know information are people who, if provided the information, can more effectively educate a child. If someone were to ask you confidential information, your response would simply be, "I can't say." If information is provided to others without the family's knowledge and permission, then the family's rights are being violated. Any group that establishes ethical standards for professional practice and teaching has language in those standards that calls for respecting the privacy of students and families. The Family Educational Right and Privacy Act, or FERPA, is the federal law that protects the privacy of students' educational records. You actually can be sued if you share information you are not supposed to share and someone's privacy has been violated. The first thing we need to consider when discussing parental roles related to education are the historic and current roles that parents have played with professionals in the schools. Some of these roles have been chosen by parents, and others have been assigned to them. The book explains that there are time frames associated with some of these different roles, but it is important to understand that as the field of special education has changed, so have the roles that parents have played. For the purposes of this class, I would like you to have a good understanding of what these parental roles are and how they have changed over time. The first role we're going to talk about is parents as the problem source. In this role, parents are perceived as the source of their child's problems. The classic example was Bruno Bettelheim's work with the University of Chicago in the 1950s. Bettelheim started one of the first clinics for individuals with autism and said autism was the result of refrigerator mothers who were unable to form attachments or bonds with their infants. He even talked about doing a parentectomy, which means the removal of the parent from the child to cure the child's problems. As you can imagine, parents of children with autism were not too fond of this theory, and it has since proven to be completely false. However, there is an unpleasant history where children have come to school and people jump to the conclusion that the child's behavior is a result of the parenting skills used in the home. One only need to go to a teacher's lounge and hear certain people gossip about kids and families to know that in some form, this attitude that parents are the cause of their children's problems is still with us. The following short clip provides one parent's perspective of the impact of being labeled a refrigerator mother.
If you've got troubles, put them on me, put them on me.
Watch it.
If you've got pain, sorrow,
Over
lay
here.
it on me, lay it on me.
I haven't seen these for a very long time.
And if you're looking for something
Oh, look
to
at that.
take it from me. And if you're looking for something to break it off me. They may think
Pete, you want to come and look?
Yeah, whatever.
Hi, sweetie pie. Look at that. You know who that is?
you're mine.
Who is that? Who? See?
Yeah.
When Peter was born, I was very young. I had gotten married when I was 18 years old.
I think the burdens of having a child who was autistic, who was going through things I didn't understand, were really overwhelming.
Yeah, I assume you guys were divorced by now.
Oh,
So,
your father was out with the two of you.
yeah, because you're not in there.
There you are.
My brother and I played a lot as children. I would pinch his nose, and, he knew that I was teasing him. And we'd wrestle a little bit. It was a very simple, heartfelt communication. I think both my mother and I have always felt that Pete was an opportunity for us to learn about how to love somebody.
I was getting treatment as a parent with a social worker, and I had read Bettelheim, so I knew what they were looking for. But I remember getting the results of all of those tests and seeing for the first time what these professionals were saying about me. And it was very, very disturbing. I was very angry when I read this stuff. The word psychotic was mentioned more than a couple of times. And that was appalling to me. As Mikler said, I was nervous and overburdened, and things were tough, but I was not psychotic.
A hero to me is somebody that can lay aside their own needs for another, especially over such long periods of time. Somebody who acts from a place of compassion and love that transcends their self-interest. My brother needs a protector. I think that my mother feels like she's his protector in this life. So I think that she's given up a lot of her freedom for that.
While there are some conditions where the parent is the problem source, as is the case with fetal alcohol syndrome, parents don't like being blamed for their children's problems, and such attitudes are not productive. A much better approach is for one to display professionalism and try to work with parents no matter where they are coming from. There is one more piece we can bring in here. If you suspect a child is being physically abused, sexually abused, or is being neglected in some way, then you are a mandated reporter. The law is very clear on this, that as an educator, you have to report the parents to the Department of Child and Family Services, or DCFS, if you suspect abuse or neglect. There is a link on this slide to the DCFS website where they provide information on mandated reporters. However, outside of an extreme situation like this, the practice is to work with parents wherever they're at and try not to be judgmental. The next two roles discussed in the book are parents as organizational members and parents as service developers. No matter what the disability condition, one will find that parents have started all of the major disability advocacy organizations. The most famous of these organizations is the ARC, or Association for Retarded Citizens. Today, they just go by the ARC. There is a link provided in this slide to the ARC's website. Parents have been great organizational members, but it is important to remember that not all parents wish to join such organizations. This should never be taken to mean that they're not interested in their child or not committed to improving the life of their child. The next role I want to talk about is parents as recipients of educational decisions. It was true that in the early days of special education, before the federal law, parents simply had to take whatever schools gave them. There was more respect given to professional decisions, especially information from a doctor. Today, IDEA requires parents to be partners in decision-making, and a school district is violating the law if they do not try and facilitate parent decision-making. The role of parents as teachers peaked in the late 1970s and early 1980s, but it is still with us to some degree. The idea was that if educators worked with a child during the day on a cluster of skills, and then parents reinforced that work at home, then the child's growth and development would be increased. Parents certainly showed that they could be teachers. They showed that they could implement educational programs effectively. But today, expecting parents to do all this teaching is looked at with a little bit more suspicion, because what many parents told us was that they were just exhausted after working all day and then coming home and having to be a teacher for the child all afternoon and evening. Although some parents will very much want to be teachers of their children, and those parents should be supported, it is important to have conversation with the families and find out what each family's comfort level is in terms of being teachers when the child is at home. Parents have also acted as political advocates. The most important thing to remember from this role is the parents have been the most successful political advocates in our field. They are much more convincing when talking with policymakers than our professionals. Parents have been very good and very successful political advocates, and everyone in special education really owes his or her job to the parent movement, because if it weren't for parent advocacy efforts, the law would never have progressed to the point where special education is a mandated service. And without the mandate, there would be limited professional opportunities for all of us with jobs in special education. Another role is parents as educational decision makers. The law gives parents much authority in terms of educational decisions. It's one of the major changes in the law over the past 30 years. Parents now have a lot of input and authority to decide what should be on the individualized educational plan. Remember that while some parents have really embraced this role, other parents have not embraced the notion of having to make all the educational decisions for their child. Educators should not be hesitant to provide their opinions and provide guidance, especially in situations where parents are looking for some leadership. Although due process is still in place as a means to resolve conflicts between schools and parents, the law today requires that schools really make a proactive effort and demonstrate that they've tried to accommodate parent requests and have done all they can to enable parents to fully participate in developing the IEP. The last role I'll talk about is the most important. This is the role of parents as the family member. A child needs parents first and foremost. Parents need the opportunity to be parents. The theme of these next several slides is that our services need to strengthen the family structure and enable parents to be good parents. If they are good parents to their children, both the children with and without disabilities in the family will benefit because the family will be healthy. From this logic has come what is termed family-centered services, where the needs and preferences of the entire family drive the service delivery system. Put another way, the services delivery system avoids being focused solely on the isolated needs of the child with a disability outside of the context of the child's family. Let's take a look at social systems theory and the premises of this theory. First of all, social systems are any group of interdependent people. This class is a social system because we are all dependent on each other. The most important social system in our society is the family because of the many functions they serve. By looking at the members of the social system as a group, one also sees that the health of the social system as a whole will be affected by the health and well-being of each individual member. Conversely, the health of the social system as a whole will affect the health and well-being of each individual member. A teacher whose actions makes the child stronger will in turn make the family unit stronger. Conversely, if schools and educators distress the family unit, then the family unit will become weaker, which in the long run will harm each member of the family unit. Think about it for a second. What functions do families serve in our society? Make a list of as many as you can. Okay, let's see if my list overlaps with your list. One function for families is to provide material things for one another, such as food, shelter, and clothing. Families are entrusted in our society to provide for the needs of their members. Families also provide love and support for one another. Humans have emotional needs, and families are the primary source to meet these needs. Families also provide a sense of security that no other social system provides. So family members serve many functions, and one of the premises of social systems theory is that whatever affects one member of the social system will affect all of the members of the social system. In the textbook, the author discusses a family system approach based on social systems theory that was proposed by Turnbull and others. They described this approach as having an underlying belief that a family is an interrelated social system with unique characteristics and needs. The family systems approach contained 4 key elements, including family characteristics, family interaction, family functions, and family life cycle. The text is very straightforward, so please pay close attention to this in your textbook. Take a minute to reflect on the ideas professionals should do to make the social system stronger. A somewhat more popular approach that is not mentioned in the textbook is the approach suggested by Dunstan and his colleagues, who have had a lot of influence on early childhood special education. They talk about the principles of enablement and empowerment. Enablement is the term that means providing opportunities for parents to make decisions, apply their competencies, and acquire new competencies. When this happens, the family becomes empowered. Professionals should be enablers. To quote Carl Dunst, who is one of the early proponents of enablement and empowerment, says that deriving pleasure and gratification in seeing others become competent and capable is a fundamental attribute of a helping professional who is a proponent of an empowerment philosophy. The key implication of an enablement and empowerment approach is that services and supports should be family-centered versus child-centered or system-centered. We can also look at the topic of families through a system of service delivery. The system involves 3 delivery methods: child-centered, system-centered, and family-centered. In child-centered services, the needs and preferences of the child drive the delivery of services and isolation of family needs and preferences. In a system-centered service model, the needs and preferences of the school, agency, or organization drive the delivery of services. And the final one is family-centered service delivery model, where the needs and preferences of the family drive the delivery of services. Especially in a child's early years, we want to be family-centered in our approach to the provision of services and supports. Many children with IEPs come from families that may be described as being on the margins of society. They are 3 times more likely to be poor. Children with IEPs are 3 times more likely to be in foster care. While all of this does vary by disability group, it is important to understand that there is a relationship between poverty and disability. It is definitely a harsher and more challenging life for a child who grows up in a poor family than a child from more advantaged situations. One of the realities is that children from poor families are much more likely to be diagnosed with what's called a high incidence or mild disability. In particular, high incidence disabilities would include mild intellectual disability, learning disability, and emotional behavior disorder.